board gaming night here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Resident Evil 3, the board game. I usually start every review showing you an overhead view of the table, and I will, but because this game's a little bit different than other games I've reviewed before, I'm going to do it just a little bit differently. This game requires a huge amount of table space. Not only do you need space to be able to place your map layout and your character information, you also need to make space for the Raccoon City dashboard, a place to roll your dice, and enough space to be able to constantly be referencing your scenario book. Resident Evil 3, the board game, wastes absolutely no time in getting you started. After just reading a few pages of the rulebook itself, the game throws you into your very first tutorial mission. The tutorial mission did a great job showing you how to move, open and close doors, pick up items, how to use the items that you ended up picking up, and also how your weapons work, which is really unique. It also teaches you how to roll the dice and how to read your combat dice. It also did a really good job showing you the objective and how to complete it. Once you complete the tutorial mission, the rulebook then introduces you to the rest of the rules in the game. There's a lot to learn, but the rulebook does a great job teaching you everything you need to know and preparing you for the nightmare you're about to experience. Although I absolutely love the way this game just got you going, the first impression I received with this game was a little bit rough. When it came to the game's core box and its expansion, the box and the inserts included were severely lacking when it came to organizing and storing the game. To be able to fit the tiles and the cards in, I had to use my Tetris skills. I also had to customize the lid so that I could fit the bigger miniatures inside. When it came to the tokens, I needed to use an actual craft box to be able to store everything. It wouldn't fit back in the box. Now the miniatures were of great quality. I really did like them. The board that supposedly represents you walking around Raccoon City was made out of this really flimsy piece of paper, very poor quality. The tiles and tokens can sometimes seem a little bit dark and hard to tell when it comes to set up the scenario, which tiles go where, but you do get used to it. When it comes to the card qualities themselves, it's okay, it's not bad, but I recommend sleeving them as there's a lot of shuffling involved. I also do like that nice touch of the door and back of the tension cards. It's a nice throwback to the old Resident Evil games. I went ahead and set up the first scenario I played through the game just to give you an idea of the layout and how the game looks on the table. The thing I really want to bring to your attention, however, is that setup time actually takes quite some time. It's not until after you've played a few games, and the rulebook also mentions this, but it doesn't really matter which tiles you use. What matters is that you're using the correct shape in the correct position that shows or that is shown in the scenario book. Nothing else really matters. Once you start getting used to that, the setup goes by much smoother. But if you want to recreate the actual game and actually use the actual tiles that belong to the location you're at, you're looking at a much higher setup time. There's a lot going on here, so just be prepared for a pretty lengthy setup time. I really enjoy the way this game handles its true solo mode, and notice I said true solo mode because you don't have to play two-handed here. You could just play with Jill Valentine if you want. There are always two starting positions in every single scenario you play. The second starting position, I believe, is right here. But in this case, when you're playing solo, you only use the very first starting position. From there on, you just go exploring the map the way you would do the video game itself. It's really, really well done. One little caveat, it doesn't bother me at all whatsoever, but it might bother you. When you're playing with two different players or two different characters, you're playing double-handed, you could actually split your movement. So you could be like, okay, Jill will cover this section and the second character will cover this section over here and meet somewhere in the middle, whatever it is that you want to do. But when you're playing true solo, you're at it alone and you have to do it all by yourself. Personally, it doesn't bother me because it really evokes the feeling of playing Resident Evil in the video game, and I truly love it. There are two main differences when you're playing solo. One is that the item box stores 24 total items inside, and the second one is when you're battling a boss, you reduce their health points or their hit points by 10 to a minimum of 10, so they can never have less than 10 points of health. I mentioned how the game evokes the feel of Resident Evil, and the theme, just by looking at the table alone, you could tell that the developers did an amazing job recreating and translating the video game into a board game. But there's something that you won't notice until you're actually playing that I think is super neat. You can see the zombies on the board, however, just like in the video game, when you're going from one room to the other and you do not know what to expect, every single tile here has a different level of exploration. Some tiles are already explored, and others that are not explored have encounter tokens laid all about. Okay? When you walk into a tile that has an encounter token, you remove the encounter token and refer to the actual scenario book itself. If the encounter token is orange, you'll look at the orange section of the scenario book. If it's yellow, you would look at the yellow chart of the scenario book. Now you notice that there's some numbers here, and every number says something next to it. Well, depending what you roll, you'll grab the encounter die and you'll roll it. Depending what number comes out or you roll will determine what outcome happens in the board itself. That to me perfectly recreates that tension and that fear that Resident Evil is so well known for. You walk into each room and you just don't know what to expect. This game captures that essence perfectly, masterfully, very well done. And it's one of my the most enjoyable aspects of this game, in my opinion. Yes, it's random, but so is Resident Evil. You don't know what's gonna happen. And speaking of the randomness, when you use your weapon, in this case a handgun, depending how many bullets you use and what type, like sometimes like right here, your weapon will say you could do burst shots. That means you could use more than one ammo. Use more than one ammo and roll from 1 to 3 dice, depending how much ammo you want to use up. Now, you might say, you got to roll your dice, and that's going to determine whether you hit. But just remember, if you've played Resident Evil, how many times have you shot that zombie waiting to get that burst, that headshot? You know what I'm talking about. And sometimes you get the headshot, and sometimes you don't. And to me, the rolling of the dice perfectly captures that feel of, will I hit him? Will I not hit him? I don't know. Sometimes you damage them and take them off the board. Other times you'll push them to an adjacent space. It all depends. But the randomness in here actually works for to its favor. And one other thing, sometimes you may say, you know what? I am running out of ammo here. Or you might be even out or really low on ammo. And your only choice might be to just run. What if you just have one ammo left, right? You might say, okay, I could shoot this zombie out of the way and make that place safe. Okay, every time you shoot a zombie, you're gonna call the attention to anyone that's linked to your tile. And the rulebook explains what linked is, but basically is if there's an open door and you're on a tile that's next to an open door, any enemy with a tile that's linked to you through an open door hears that gunshot and moves closer to where you are. It's so great. It's so thematic, and it really fills the game with tension, and it feels so good when you're playing it. It really does feel like you're playing Resident Evil in board game form. I also enjoy the flow of the game. You have your action phase where your character is moving around, closing doors, picking up items, opening doors, doing whatever your character does. You have the reaction phase where the actual zombies and the monsters get closer to you or just basically react. And finally, you have the tension phase, which you draw a tension card from the deck, and usually either something good happens or nothing happens or something pretty bad happens to you. But I really like this tension deck because this reminds me of the very first time I played Resident Evil on the PlayStation 1, and they would have that hidden load screen in which you're slowly getting closer to the door and you turn the knob and you slowly creak the door open and you walk inside. You know, in the PlayStation 1 era, that was a hidden load screen. But here, that's what the tension deck is. And I really, really love that attention to detail. Every time I draw from the tension deck, I'm always picturing that in my head. It's so much fun. I just enjoy it. It was a wonderful touch. And it just added to the overall experience of the Resident Evil game. It really evokes the spirit of Resident Evil very, very well. And speaking about that tension deck, there are scenarios in which you'll see a typewriter, and I know that this token's really dark, and that's one of the negatives that I have. Some of these tokens and tiles are pretty dark, but some scenarios will have a typewriter somewhere on the map. If your tension deck ever runs low and you happen to carry an ink ribbon with you, what you do when you're near a typewriter, you use your ink ribbon, you shuffle your discard pile from your tension deck up, and you create a new tension deck. And I think that's a really nice touch and a nice way to implement what the typewriter and the ink ribbon used to do in the old game. Instead of saving your game, it literally saves your life, because if that deck runs out, it spells game over. And one of the last things I'd like to mention about how well this game actually implements that feel of Resident Evil into the board game is the way items are used. When you're looking at the Raccoon City dashboard, you'll see that there are a lot of locations that are undiscovered, and you have to find a way to make them discoverable, and sometimes you have to unlock them. So those show up on the map, but they'll be locked, right? And in order to unlock the Downtown 3 in this example, you need to, somewhere on this map, or another map, depending, sometimes it may be in a different scenario, you'll go around and you'll start picking up items. And specifically, sometimes item C, or these little map icons here. And you'll be able to find yourself items that will then be able to unlock the next section of the map, allowing you to play a new scenario and explore an entirely different part of Raccoon City. If that doesn't evoke Resident Evil to you, I don't know what does. Not only does it do it with that, there are locked doors that you'll have to go around looking for the actual key and then come back and unlock the door and open the door. I mean, it feels like Resident Evil down to the T. You're just playing it in a board game. But it's phenomenal the way they did it. There's lots of things that I probably would have never thought of, and they did it, and they implemented it flawlessly. And the objective of the game is basically to go from one scenario to another, finding all the items needed to be able to unlock the clock tower. And once you finish both of the clock tower locations, you escape Raccoon City and you survive. But that's the objective of the game. And the actual gameplay loop here is I love it. It's hands down enjoyable for me. Now, I will I will talk about something quickly, and it's I loved it, but as you can see from my intro, I am a huge Resident Evil fan. I always have been. I've been playing it for 25 years, since I was about like 15 years old or 16 years old. I grew up with Resident Evil, and I love Resident Evil. So keep that in mind. I played this, and as a Resident Evil board game, this did everything and then some. This did what I would have wanted in a Resident Evil board game, and it did it perfectly, masterfully. I really enjoyed it. However, if you don't like Resident Evil, I'm not sure if you'll like this. I'm not sure. I think that even if it wasn't called Resident Evil, it's a great experience. But it being Resident Evil elevates it so much more. And the fact that it captures the essence and the spirit of Resident Evil just makes it all the better. So in my opinion, this is an amazing game. But your mileage may vary. Maybe you don't like Resident Evil. And it is a campaign game. I'll tell you, you could get really far in this game. And if you fail, or if the threat track goes too far up, you lose and literally have to start from the very beginning. But to me, I don't mind because I really enjoyed the game. And you can also play one-off scenarios too. You don't need to play the campaign in the way the game wants you to play. You could do one-offs, but the way you'll go about it and the way that the items will be placed randomly in different places is going to guarantee that you're going to play the game in different ways. Also, you could create your own scenarios. There is nothing stopping you from trying to recreate your favorite whatever scene from any Resident Evil game and try to do it in on your tabletop. It doesn't stop you from doing it. This game is really customizable in my opinion. I'm looking into doing it. I'm gonna have fun trying different things with this game. But yeah, I don't know how you'll feel about it if you don't like Resident Evil, but it's a good game even without the name. And if you like Resident Evil, you're gonna really like it. And if you love Resident Evil, I think you're really gonna love this. Resident Evil 3, the board game, has a lot of dice rolling and a lot of luck, but the game has a lot of luck itself too. I mean, you don't know what's around every corner. If that zombie you're walking over is gonna all of a sudden reanimate and attack you, or how many shots it's gonna take to take a zombie down, or if you're gonna get a headshot or not. You don't know. It's random as well. So it's faithful to its source material. The actual tiles themselves are a little bit on the dark side, especially those tokens. And some of those tokens are really hard to make out, but you do get used to it. That's kind of a bummer. I wish that would have been done better. The actual Raccoon City dashboard, I wish it would have been something much more than just that flimsy piece of paper. That was not really good. I didn't like that. And the box and the lack of insert and storage solution, oh, I really wish that would have been done better. But none of those things stopped me from enjoying the game. The game itself was very well made. It has that Resident Evil feel. It has that sense of exploration, that tension, that horror of what's around every corner, picking up items, using items. It has everything Resident Evil. And because of that, I'm going to say that Resident Evil 3, the board game, is a must-buy, must-own, solo, and co-op experience, especially if you're a Resident Evil fan. This was Solo Board Gaming Night. Once again, thank you so much for spending time with me. And I truly hope you all have a great game night. Take care.
Resident Evil.